Chapter 8 Mountain Climbing, in which the Grasshopper defends his definition by arguing that some games require a limitation in principle of the means a player will permit himself to use in order to reach his goal. Not all games, I said, are competitive. Therefore, not all games exhibit the kind of means-limiting rule which specifies an opponent whose job it is, in effect, to make achievement of the prelusory goal more difficult. There are, that is to say, one-player games, and there accordingly still exists the possibility of discovering or of inventing a game which does not have constitutive rules as you describe them. I suggest that the sport of mountain climbing is such a game. Sir Edmund Hillary sets out to climb Mount Everest. He will use the best tools available for the job, and although the number and kind he will use are limited, they are certainly not limited by the kind of arbitrary rule that figures in games, but only by how much he can carry. Although 1,000 feet of rope would be more useful, he cannot carry that much rope, and although X number of pitons would provide that much more insurance for him, he can carry only X minus N pitons, and so on. He employs all the most efficient means available to him. Accordingly, Grasshopper, if you are willing to grant that mountain climbing is a game, you are evidently faced with an example of a game that does not have rules which prohibit more efficient in favor of less efficient means. I am willing to grant that mountain climbing is a game, Grasshopper replied. Now, Skepticus, suppose that Sir Edmund, with nearly superhuman nerve and skill, and after escaping death a score of times, has finally arrived at the summit, more dead than alive, but with the truly magnificent exhilaration that can be produced only by a supreme triumph. As he surveys the panorama of peaks and ridges below him, he is startled to hear himself being addressed in the following words. "Sir Edmund, I presume." Sir Edmund whirls around to see facing him an immaculately groomed Londoner, complete with bowler hat and furled umbrella, and with a copy of that day's Times under his arm. "What are you doing here?" cries Sir Edmund. "How the devil did you get here?" "Why, I took the escalator on the other side of the mountain, my dear fellow." What would Sir Edmund's response have been if he had known about the escalator beforehand? I suggest that it would have been one or the other of two responses. 1. He might have decided to ascend the mountain anyway, while adopting a constitutive rule prohibiting use of the escalator. In that case, the resulting instance of mountain climbing would have been a game according to my definition. However, 2. He might have become completely uninterested in Mount Everest and decided to seek an escalatorless mountain instead. Let us suppose that he acts upon the latter option. Mount Invincible, he finds, is such a mountain, and so he decides to climb it. Now, what you want to maintain, Skepticus, is that Sir Edmund is trying to play a ruleless game. That is, he is pursuing a goal in such a way that the efforts to achieve it do not depend upon artificially ruling out easier in favor of more difficult means. He is seeking to achieve a state of affairs which is in its natural condition sufficiently challenging. Very well. We find Sir Edmund beginning his preparations to scale Mount Invincible, having made quite sure that no artificial means of ascent have been installed upon its slopes and crags. Before he has progressed very far in these preparations, the bowler-hatted escalator user meets Sir Edmund at a London club. In the course of conversation, he remarks, "I see by the Times that you plan to climb Mount Invincible." "That is so," replies Sir Edmund, somewhat coolly. "Well, there's a beautiful view from the summit. I took a helicopter up there just last week." Sir Edmund at once calls off preparations for the ascent of Mount Invincible and begins the search anew. At length he finds Mount Impossible. The most careful testing assures him that the wind currents which perpetually surround the summit prevent a landing by any flying machine or any other kind of mechanical contrivance. The best way, bar none, to get to the top of Mount Impossible is by climbing it, and Sir Edmund climbs it. Has Sir Edmund succeeded in playing a game with no rules? I think not. It is true that he did not choose some goal, X, and then limit the means he would permit himself to use in achieving it, but he accomplished the same result by doing what he did do. He chose goal X rather than goal Y because the means for achieving goal X were more limited than the means for achieving goal Y, and the only reason he chose X over Y was because of that limitation. Therefore, although no overt act prohibiting more efficient in favor of less efficient means was made, that was precisely the effect of choosing the more difficult goal. We may accordingly say, I suggest, that there is here a limitation in principle, for if some new and more efficient means were introduced into the situation, for example a flying craft that could land, then the available means would once again be insufficiently limited. There is, that is to say, no difference in principle between creating a challenge by an artificial prohibition of more efficient means to a goal and artificially choosing a goal just because the means for its achievement present a greater challenge than do the means for achieving a different goal. There is no difference in principle between ruling out use of the escalator on Mount Everest and ruling out Mount Everest in favor of Mount Impossible. But let us put aside for the moment our two additional mountains and return to the real Sir Edmund and the real Mount Everest, where there were no escalators and no flying craft available. Sir Edmund did not, in fact, have to choose between ruling out these devices and selecting another mountain. Everest was fine for his purposes, and you will no doubt wish to contend, Skepticus, he used the most efficient means in climbing it. But suppose we had put to the real Sir Edmund the following question. Sir Edmund, there is no escalator to the top of Mount Everest, nor is it the case that anyone is prepared to install one. Still, if that were possible, at no expense to yourself, that is understood, would you wish one to be installed so that your ascent would be easier, safer, and more likely to succeed? It is obvious that Sir Edmund would have said no to such a proposal. What I have called a limitation in principle, or a subjunctive or counterfactual limitation, if you like, is, it seems to me, necessary in order to explain Sir Edmund's otherwise perplexing response. For it makes clear that Sir Edmund had set himself a illusory goal, which required him to climb mountains, rather than the pre-illusory goal of simply being at their summits, which would not have required him to climb mountains. Well, Grasshopper, I said when he had concluded, you have removed my last doubts about constitutive rules. I would like now to raise an objection of a rather different kind, and I'm afraid that if it is sound it will require a quite radical revision of your definition. Then you must state the objection, Skepticus, come what may.